Good evening, everyone. Happy Independence Day. Good evening, Aanchal. Good evening, Vikas. So, this is the second event we are having on MuMe Matters. MuMe is the short form of Museum Memories Project, which was launched in 2020 April. It's an oral history documentation project, which is recording the oral histories of museum visitors from across the world. So, MuMe Matters is part of one of the most integral, the core of the project, where we discuss themes and topics which are important to museums in the Indian context and in the global context. But maybe museums don't have the space or the budget or the relevant staff sometimes to talk and discuss about them. It's a very positive and constructive approach. We are not here to criticize, but we are here to aid museums and history and the making of a very balanced post-pandemic museum and cultural heritage. So today we are talking to Vikas. Aanchal is an architect and she's a heritage manager who's a young professional starting out in her career. And Vikas Dilawari is a very senior conservation architect based in Mumbai. He has won many awards, both national and international, for his really painstaking and very beautifully restored buildings all across Maharashtra and outside Maharashtra also. We have already recorded an interview with him, which is available on our YouTube channel of Museum Memories Project. And today we'll be discussing everything about conservation architecture, what's there for young professionals, what is the future of conservation architecture, cultural heritage in India, especially in a post-pandemic scenario. So now I'll hand over the space to both Aanchal and Vikas. And thank you both for taking out time and joining us.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Aanchal,
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for introducing us, ma'am. And good evening to all the participants, and especially to Vikas, sir. Thank you for joining us and trying to at least share some parts of your experience over the years that you've had in the heritage conservation field. I am, as ma'am just rightly said, I'm a very young professional who is just starting out into this career of heritage management, heritage conservation, and people of my age generally we look up to such senior architects for advice, for tips, suggestions, whatever words of wisdom you would like to share with us. So in continuation, so the series is in continuation with the interview session that Paulomi had with Vikas sir earlier. As she had mentioned, it has been uploaded to the Museum Memories YouTube channel. So we would really suggest all our participants who have not viewed the interview to go back and have a look at it as well. So we'll be continuing from there. So, sir, I would just like to start off really into the whole conservation core of the core of conservation, basically, which is over the years of experience that you've had in heritage conservation, what would you say were one of the major challenges, not maybe not specifically, maybe like a general umbrella term, challenges or issues that you faced during your projects? This question is specifically for people like us who really don't have an idea of what it is that we are going to face in heritage conservation projects. So we would just like to know any generic things, or maybe even some examples from your past projects, issues that you faced. It could even be very simple issues, as in stakeholders not cooperating, or maybe something very specific, totally up to you. So maybe any examples that you would want to share with us.
Thank you for Aanchal, and thank you for me. It's a pleasure to share some experiences in the last 30 years. The question is very interesting, and what I really want to do is just break this up into three parts, based on the first decade when we started our careers, and the second decade, and now the present decade. So, it'll help you in understanding what were the difficulties at different stages, because it is all contextual at a given time. So when we all started our careers, like how, like a young professional as how you are, we were seeking for projects. And that was a time when conservation was not accepted as a discipline. So what our role was basically to help the NGOs who were environmental NGOs, fighting the environmental concerns at that stage. But slowly, conservation came into their mainstream, and we were helping them to lobby to government to introduce heritage legislation, to introduce listing, not to demolish a building, and things like that. So I remember my initial days when I did a lot of listing, first for Delhi Intact way back in late 1980s. And then in early 90s, helping EAG, Indian Heritage Society, say Bombay Committee, and Intact Mumbai chapter to help in establishing the awareness of conservation. It was quite a task. The other person, which is basically normally it was either the government or sometimes private, but basically the government at that stage were not inclined to listen to you as what you were saying. So until unless we had to do things on paper, show them an alternative and do this thing. And this was a lot of activism, which was in our initial parts of our practices. I graduated from School of Planning and Architecture post-graduation in urban conservation. So the focus was on urban conservation at that stage. When we started practicing, we realized that urban conservation is not going to happen overnight. It will take ages. It will take decades. We've been struggling for so long, and after 20, 30 years, we're finding, World Heritage sites coming in and things like that. So what came into your labs at that time as projects were architectural conservation projects. You have to visualize that at that time, liberalization was happening. A lot of multinationals were coming to India. They wanted to be housed in historic buildings because that gave them an advantage to show that, they are, like the banks and like corporates who wanted to be in South Bombay in historic buildings. They were sensible to approach conservation architects like me. Like we started getting breaks helping other architects who were appointed for the projects, who were doing the interiors and things like that. And I remember the first project was, a building called Aanchal Mansion in Mumbai, which was a tenanted property. Jardine Fleming came in to convert it into their offices, and they took one whole wing. So we were told to restore the exteriors, and that's the stage where you realize you don't have any skills. You don't have, you don't have contractors to execute. You don't have material. I'm talking. You have to understand 1993, 94, where lime was not spoken about. Limestone was not easily available. And yes, you had graduated. You had a conviction that you have to prove it and demonstrate it. So what we really did was we got hold of any good contractor who could be the resource contractor, erect a scaffolding, and started helping and searching for specialized labor, who were specialized craftsmen who could then help this person. And so we had initially some freedom to execute what we wanted to. And that's how I restored this first wing of Aanchal Mansion, which was back in 95. And it was very difficult to find stained glass artists, to find, lime masons and things like that. But all this experimentation started. All the initial projects which we got were only facades. No one gave us a project as how you see projects happening now, where full building and areas and lighting and display and everything happens. That was not the scene. You found another interesting break which came in my way was American Express Bank. Basically I was helping them in enhancing the footpath, but I used to go inside and you got a chance to meet the CEO, who was a German gentleman. He was renovating the branch, and when they were renovating the branch, which is located in Flora Fountain in one of the most historic buildings, Oriental Insurance buildings, they realized that there is sculptures and there is artwork behind. So that's how they realized that that's not their expertise. So they contacted me, and I got an opportunity to do some adaptive reuse and to help the bank in restoring it to its original glory. Now, having said this, it's very difficult because American Express Bank is famous for its blue signage and its blue and gray corporate identity. And they wanted to reflect that in the interiors, to tell them to expose the stone, not to have lighting on the ceiling when you have natural light. It was very difficult, but very easy made because the CEO understood. So American Express Bank became the first bank to really do a conservation in its interiors, respecting conservation. And it won an Indian Heritage Society Award. Now, this is where these kind of awards which were constituted. Now you have UNESCO awards, but before UNESCO came in 2000. But before that, we used to have Indian Heritage Society Awards. So these awards were very encouraging, and a lot of these corporates went to get these awards because it was like an acknowledgement, it was like an advertisement, and it helped them in their corporate identity. So it was a win-win situation for all. For a conservation architect, we got breaks. For the Heritage Society who constituted the awards, the awareness spread. And for the bank, publicity happened. So one bank followed it and then the other banks followed it. So that's how the next break was ANZ Grindlays Bank, where you were told to do the exterior. So what I'm trying to come to a point is that initially it was just the facades. And suppose if I had learned the technique of how to clean or how to remove paint, or the big question of how much to clean, because everyone now finds the building to be cleaned, over cleaned. But the question is how much to clean. Whether to clean also is a question, because some school of thought says not to clean because it reflects, it gives you the patina. So interestingly, you got chances to experiment. So the best of the best work which we did in the first 10 years were real hands-on, real experimentation with freedom and flexibility. So in the Grindlays Bank, while you were removing the paint, we discovered terracotta behind. So you couldn't leave terracotta painted, and you wanted to clean it. So you had to specially import a mist machine, JOS system, which was prevalent in use there, which was a mixture of dust and air and water, and it was non-abrasive, and we could clean it. So we experimented with that. The bank gave you the freedom and the flexibility, but yes, when it came to the interiors, they did what they wanted to do. The other important break, which at least happened for Mumbai, and I'm talking specifically for Mumbai, is that British Council and Bombay University decided to restore the Rajabai Tower stained glass. And I was fortunate that once you studied in York, you were aware of some amount of how to handle colonial buildings, because that training there gave you that kind of thing. And the British Council invited the British experts to come to India to train the Indian counterparts. So I became like a manager in charge, and I stayed two years completely in Rajabai Tower every day, morning to evening. So you knew everything of the stained glass, then how the stained glass would fit into iron armature, and from this iron part of it to the stone masonry. And interestingly, since we were dealing with British experts, you had to erect the scaffolding which would be safe for them. So the whole concept of safety, tubular steel scaffolding with working platforms covering health and safety, all was taken into account. But sadly, now if you see what happens, people are doing work with single bamboo scaffoldings after 20, 30 years of. So this is where I'm saying that conservation started with a big bang and everyone wanted to. I'm not talking about just myself. There were my other colleagues, Ravi Gundu Rao, who was experimenting with many things and training other people. And these were good encouragements because, we were all trying our best to do things to prove a point that conservation can work and we follow the international standards. So this was the first decade, which is 1990s to 2000. From 2000 onwards, we started getting approaches from institutions, something like YWCA, YMCA, or organizations who owned historic buildings and asking us to look into their buildings, both the exteriors and also as well as the internal parts of it. Of course, interiors were not included. They wanted it to be refurbished from inside also. So then these were the kind of the next break. Churches came a big way. So I was fortunate to do many churches. And what happened is in this phase, we started handling with, now we realized that our limitation, that we didn't have expertise on stained glass. We didn't have expertise on gilding. We didn't have expertise on line. So these were the kind of things which were happening. And again, as I said to you, if necessity is it gives you chances to invent so many things. So with the help of expert specialized people clubbed in with the main contractor, we managed to do a lot of these things on a successful basis. Two good examples which come in my thoughts were, it was an unfortunate part that a fire happened in the corporation hall of the Bombay Municipal Corporation in 2000. And intact Mumbai chapter was asked to restore it. And we were given a free hand. The building was given vacant, and we could manage to restore it to its original grandeur. I was fortunate that I met Foy Nissen, who introduced me to many architectural historians of UK. They gave valuable contributions. So it's not an individual Vikas Dilawari, it's so many other people who've contributed, in giving the best advices to do the best job to ensure the standards are maintained. So the corporation hall, we could restore it to that richness. And what was interesting is the people, the decision makers, the corporators, they were unaware of the richness which they were, they were in that hall, but they never saw the grandeur there. So that helped them in being convinced that conservation can work. One project led to another. So they owned the BMC owned the Bhavda Jilat Museum. And the next project started from there, which was Mrs. Tasneem Mehta, who was spearheading the project. She managed to get the sponsors. She was the lead person who formed a tripartite agreement and guiding the project. I managed to do the architectural part of it, architectural conservation part of it. And the whole museum was revived. It was shut for a few years. The display, the artifacts, all this was restored with the help of professional restorers. So, for the first time, the game started going larger, not restricted only to facades or the interior refurbishment, but to other things, services, and other things got incorporated. So this was an opportunity where now you were seeing things in a larger picture. The good things were that the buildings were given vacant to you. Similarly, Aga Khan Palace in Pune happened at that time, and we worked. So this is how I think these were some success stories where conservation proved, where the footfall increased, people started appreciating it, press wrote very positive things. But the last 10 years, I must say, has been slightly disappointing. Disappointing from the fact that now the government became major clients, and which is a good thing to happen because they own a lot of heritage buildings. But the freedom which you used to enjoy, which the others gave you to have experts or to have specialized craftsmen to be a part of the team, and they used to get respected and felicitated also. If an UNESCO award came, you'll have the individual mason's name or you'll have the gold gilding guy's name. So they used to do it for the pride of that. But unfortunately, the shift when it shifted to PWDs and other government projects, then it became L1 system, which is the lowest contractor will get it, and that's where things really started going in a different direction. And the unfortunate part is that many a times the real conservation, because with private clients, you prepare an inspection report, you share the details of what the findings are. But when it comes to other projects, it's slightly beautification driven, which is more harmful than good because they want conspicuous results. So according to me, we are at a threshold where what is the right path to be chosen is the kind of a thing. So these are some of the challenges, or these are some of the difficulties. You would love to work with kind of government, provided the basic conservation principles are respected. But many a times you find that you reach a situation where these are compromised. Unfortunately, it's the system in which we all fall a prey, kind of a thing.
Right, right. So basically the tender process is what you're trying to say is that the tender process, whoever is the lowest bidder tends to get the project, and that kind of compromises on the
Yes.
overall quality. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So one more thing is that
yes.
just one more thing is that a tender is prepared 3 years ago, and by the time it gets its approval, 1 or 2 years have passed, and in the same rates, then someone has to execute, and then it takes 1 or 2 years for it to be implemented. So 4 to 5 years, and many a times you can't work on these buildings because they are in use. I'm just citing an example of Elphinstone College, which was an election center. It's just behind the High Court, so no noisy work. And if things have to happen in the night or in this thing, it's very difficult for things to be implemented.
Right. So moving on with the same question in continuation, what would you suggest? How do emerging professionals start off? Like, where should we start pitching in, and what should be our first step? Basically, to enter this field, what should be the right mindset, or what should be the right foundation for us? After our basic education is done, we have masters in conservation, in heritage management, in built heritage. How do we enter the field, and in such a way that we are more in tune with the whole process, and also with basically understanding how to conserve the building, also ethically, not really falling for these shortcomings in the like you said, in the tender process and everything. How do you feel that the younger generation should start off? Like, what is like the push, the first step towards their career?
Yeah, this is interesting that this Charles Wallace scholarship used to insist on having people with 2 years experience if you wanted to be selected to go to UK. I think 1 or 2 years of experience in normal architecture or in conservation or anywhere else is a good thing to have, because that helps you in understanding what the reality is there. Because if you know things, you can guide the contractors. What is now happening is it's now become a contractor driven kind of market, where the contractor and the so-called client, especially the executive engineers, decide what they want to do, and we are made a tool to follow what they want to do what they want to do. If you are fortunate, try to get smaller projects of private natures. I know it's easy said, but difficult to get. But if you get an opportunity to do simple projects, which might not be so-called high fancy conservation, but at least you understand the working mechanism of conservation, so that you can at least tell the contractor what is to be done and to be executed. So one is apprenticeship. Second is to start with smaller projects till you get more confident to handle bigger things. Yeah, these are some things which I would advise.
And so, like you mentioned in your previous projects, there are very skilled craftsmen and masons that you require for safeguarding different elements of built heritage. Post-pandemic, we have all seen that their lives have been greatly impacted. And as young professionals and emerging professionals, we would like to understand, is there a way we can work with skilled craftsmen, or is there a way we can empower them so that these skills are safeguarded? Otherwise, over time, as we have seen, the trend is that the next generations just kind of get farther and farther away from their original, skills and the knowledge that their ancestors had, and now they're just going into different occupations just because of financial stability, and because their skills are not providing them the money or even the future. They do not see a very solid future in these skills and in these traditional knowledge systems. So is there a way we can collaborate with the skilled craftsmen, or is there a way government can sort of empower them? Is that something that emerging professionals can help in or pitch in, especially post-pandemic?
Well, irrespective of post-pandemic or before pandemic, it is an essential question which you raised. And it is very important to have that skill set. Otherwise, conservation doesn't really happen. If you don't have the traditional craftsmen who know how to do work upon it. I was shocked when I was doing one government project where I put mandates saying that we'll hire specialized people. They just struck the mandates out because in government PWD things you don't have mandates. They'd start doubting that it will be misused. Now, you know that conservation is labor intensive. And it is important to have the traditional craftsmen on hired basis, like every morning and evening which they work, they should be paid because they are not subcontractors. Unfortunately, our government system doesn't allow this. And if you can do something, either through the whatever the government machinery is there, the technical, what is it called, technical skill development and things like that, that might be a possibility. I think Rajasthan government started training some master craftsmen, but when governments change, many of these schemes change. These are the sad part of it. But as youngsters, if you can manage to find a good craftsman, because you learn a lot from them. I have learned a lot from the mason who used to work with me, and he's now understood the conservation philosophy. That's why we have been asking him to do things in that manner. So it's a good barter system where we all learn in this whole process. So yes, it needs to be encouraged, but the sad part is there's no room and scope until unless we all fight for it, or you circumvent it and you start getting like how Intact used to execute some projects. We did that only to set high benchmarks. So there you didn't have L1 system, so you may do that to prove the best skills.
Okay. So, ma'am, do you want to?
Sorry, yeah, I want to just say something that I'm sorry, our time is going to be up in another 3-4 minutes. So please re-log in with the same Zoom link. But Vikas, what you were saying, just to ask you quickly that how will they get access to these craftspeople? How will they contact them? Where is there a resource directory? If they're based out of Northern India, they can never do a project in Southern India, or like how?
There's no resource directory. So you have to search for it. I remember I had to go to Vasai to find the gold gilding guys, and then you realize they are traditional craftsmen who do woodwork. So since then, all my churches, all my altars, all my gilding, I hire them. And the interesting thing is, it's 3 generations, and the younger generation have graduated from JJ School of Arts and things like that, and they have more fine artists who now do that work. So it's easier. For the lime mason also, initially my lime mason refused to work on it, saying that मेरे से नहीं होगा. I said, आपके दादा कैसे करते थे, आप कोशिश तो करो. So it's through this you have to find everything. अगर ready-made मिल जाएगा resource में, अभी तो everyone wants to Google and you'll find the craftsmen on LinkedIn also now. So that's the new generation, new world, but थोड़ी सी मेहनत करनी पड़ती है उसके लिए. And that's what is it. That's what makes the fun of it, because you also travel to that place. You see that for the first time you saw the wood workshop. Otherwise, where do we have a scale turning machine? Kisko bolte hain? What are the tools? If you go to a stained glass workshop, you'll see it with the lights. These are the things which are required. And again, as we said, we didn't have stained glass artists. So the British experts came, and we had 6 Indian people who had some knowledge on this craft, and now they are experts handling it in different parts of the country. You have Swati, you have Manikandan, you have Deepak, Rohinton. They are all doing works since 20 years after Rajabai Tower. So that's how the craft spreads. But you should be able to approach them and to get them, and you should be able to dovetail, because someone who's taken L1 contract will never people something higher. Now we have to learn how to break this. As I said to you, I worked on a building which was with ONGC, and in ONGC, you realize that when you have an offshore project, If I'm not mistaken, they don't follow the system of L1. So why is heritage not treated as sacrilege? See, it's also important and it's also good.
Okay, so I think we'll just be logged out. So
Leave and rejoin.
yeah, rejoin using the same link, please. This applies to everybody. Please rejoin using the same link, and I'll just stop the recording.
L1 becomes essential. So what is the alternative?
As I said to you, Operation Hall caught fire. There was this opportunity, and the municipal commissioner, Mr. Ranganathan, at that stage approached Intact, which was one of the prime NGOs, and they gave the work to him, and so we could manage to circumvent the system. They had sanctioned 3 crores for the project. We managed to do it in about 75 lakhs, and the rest was all saving for them. So that was one. As I said to you, if the so-called decision makers can be convinced, or if it's a CSR project, like I've done many CSR projects. Aga Khan Palace was an NTDC sponsored project, but it was routed through the Gandhi Memorial Society. So I got a free hand to do it in the way, because my clients were GNMS, and they were paying me and they were getting money from MTDC, and of course we were submitting reports. For that matter, Kalagoda Association, with Kalagoda Association, I've restored 3 fountains, which were sponsored by them. So then this becomes the next way out, because it's easier, it gives you the flexibility to do things.
Okay. Yeah, you answered it. Except that if it has to be rooted, I mean, is there a way that government can be convinced, which is not possible, because non-tendered thing can have its own problems, and the major buildings are with government, generally speaking.
I understand. I tried to do 2 projects with the PWD system, but I gave it up and I resigned from some projects because I couldn't. I just realized that if I'm doing more harm than good, I can't. But yeah, having said this now it's a challenge for the younger generation, because that's their bread and butter. For me, I was fortunate. I started my careers with private clients. So the first 20 years, I had all private clients. Trust and a lot of Parsi community who understood heritage and encouraged. But everyone is not so lucky and fortunate.
Even sir, since like the past couple of years or so, I have been very interested in exploring the CSR angle of heritage conservation, and I've been speaking to a lot of emerging professionals who are still setting out into this field, and no one really has a clear idea of how we can tap into this resource of using CSR for heritage projects. Is there some are there any suggestions you could give to us, something that we could take up? Because I've been personally trying to explore this whole idea of using CSR funds for heritage, because that really makes a lot of sense, especially for our generation now and for the coming future also, to put things to good use. What would you suggest?
There's going to be one initial investment that you'll have to prepare the inspection reports with copying, which you'll have to do it on your own, because only then you could convince someone with figures, because just a project on its own merits, no one gets convinced. They want to know what is the figures involved and the methodology, and then the owner has to form a tripartite agreement with the for its future maintenance also. So you have to motivate either the direct, like how Tata Trust does a lot of work. You have TCS sponsoring some projects. You have the RPG Foundation and things like that. So if you can manage to find someone, it's good. Otherwise, you have NGOs like Kalagoda is there, or many other NGOs are there. They can be the facilitators, and that's where the younger generation can get chances to work on, say smaller buildings, smaller fountains, and things like that.
Right. All right. Are there any more questions someone would like to ask, or any suggestions the participants would have?
Because I have a question, which is a bit of a roundabout question. First, listening to what even say a young student like say Aanchal, who's just getting into the profession, that's really what triggered the query, which is so one is, as say a conservation architect, I mean, one hears of a certain kind of buildings that are being looked at, being the upkeep of which is being done. On the other hand, I mean, we are also hearing of things like, say, there is a redevelopment, right? So say a BDD Chawl gets redeveloped, or like say Bhindi Bazaar gets redeveloped. I mean, we don't hear of say conservation in those areas. And along with all that, there is also this whole thing of that you say, when I look around the Bombay of today, say 50 years down the line, 60 years down the line, we may not be around, but I'm saying for the younger generation, what's the kind of buildings that would be conserved? I mean, or would we keep getting stuck in kind of, looking at an area like, say, South Bombay alone? Or would conservation kind of expand into other areas? And I don't mean like an arbitrary building, like, say, in some corner of Bombay. You know what I'm trying to say? It's a slightly convoluted question, but I wonder if...
I completely understand what you're saying. As I said to you, in last 30 years, not seen any so-called inclination or encouragement directly from government to enthuse conservation as a mainstream thing, or to accept it also. It's only that there is a pressure which is built up, or you have some laws which also keep getting diluted. So if you really see our laws, they are all diluted. The grade 3 buildings and the precincts, the cess properties have disappeared. First, the government never wants to bring them on the legislation also. And what we have then starts disappearing. You have the buffer zones which are reduced. Grade 1s are changed to grade 2s. So unless you don't have, we have to understand that what we are losing is something which is irreplaceable. I'm not against development. I think what we are missing, the entire country is missing, is we are not talking urban renewal. When you talk urban renewal, there are many mainstreams in it. There is development, there is adaptive reuse, there is reconstruction. It's a mix. It's a mix of everything. But our focus is that only redevelopment is an alternative. We talk of TDR, but TDR has never worked. What you rightly said, it's like milestones being preserved, but miles of heritage being lost. Or for that matter, a mill being destroyed and a chimney being kept. What are you going to do with that? What is required, and what is the sad part is we are talking of so many cities. We talk of smart cities, we talk of this. Why can't we experiment with one heritage city and see whether it works or not? Give a chance for 5 years or 10 years and give heritage the focus of development and see whether it takes you somewhere or not. If it doesn't take, okay, let's shut the shop. I don't know whether I've answered it.
Chiradip, you're muted.
Thanks, Vikas. Thanks. Yeah.
So Vikas, in sort of connected to what Chirodeep was asking, what brings to my mind is why do we need heritage? I mean, like you're saying, if an old building goes, it goes, right? How, forget the government, how do we involve local communities? Because a lot of people will say those who live in old buildings, even if, like, I'm talking from a Rajasthan, Gujarat, or those Haveli kind of contexts. When you are asking someone to maintain their building, they can afford it. I'm not talking of the government, I'm talking of individuals or people who want to convert their heritage home into a hotel or a homestay or something like that, which applies again to the entire country. It might not be in a fragile condition, but a lot of people would rather paint it in a more
It's not
modern,
like that.
touristy.
No, I don't think it's like that. Let's go to 3 places which are tourist destinations. Why don't you go to Fort Kochi or Mattancherry? Even there are no laws, people are not breaking the buildings because you know that people are coming to enjoy the ambience which it has. And if you realize that the interiors which they do is so sensitive that you really don't require it. So heritage economics, where it starts working, you really don't require any special laws or anything. It's the continuity of that. Now, the sad part is we have rent control, and that's the reason why things don't get maintained. Now, if you want to have rent control, you can have it based on economic consideration, and suppose it happens in New York. But we need to, now the central government has introduced the Model Rent Act, but various states have to. So it's a big $1 million question whether they'll implement it or not.
Is it that some states are better at conserving their heritage, or because the laws are different, or
I
people
have
are
just,
educated?
I think all states are the same. But what is interesting is that, at least for the first time, I used to always wonder that there has been no marches against a black flag march or a black ribbon band march, but at least it started now. The environmental movement and the this thing. So for the first time, you're seeing collective actions of people protesting against some kind of, if they feel it is detrimental. You saw it in RA, forest
Yes.
and things like that. So that is coming, but it's not come to build heritage. You don't have a Victorian society, or you don't have a Art Deco society has started. You've not seen something where you literally force kind of this thing. You don't demolish this.
Good. That's a very important point. So, Aanchal, when you are asking for your generation, you guys can also look at forming such action groups or such societies. There's a very active Art Deco Mumbai, but then Art Deco buildings
Yes.
are there all across India. So maybe different cities can have their own. Like, I know Calcutta has very important Art Deco buildings, but it does not have a very vigilant society or something that seeks for action. What about smaller cities? Big cities, metros still get some attention. So maybe that's something you people can look at. It's not just restoring a building or conserving a building. There are multiple ways of
Having these ha- having these societies does not help unless there is a political will. Nothing will happen. Understand that very, very clearly.
So how,
And this is my opinion.
sir, the political will, can people impose, demand the local people?
There is a huge amount of money. Why don't we accept that? I didn't want to speak this,
No,
but the
please
whole
mention.
urban design, urban development is controlled by the ministry, and the turnover of urban development in any metropolitan or even in small cities is so high that unless the politicians have a will to do things, nothing can happen. I'm confirmed on this.
This is the time where the World Heritage status can be used to make things happen, but what you've really seen is still it lacks protection. Everyone enjoys the status and when it comes, but there's very little done to make it be implementable. So Pitker is, we can use such kind of status and convert it perhaps and see the economic benefits, because ultimately if it creates an economic benefits, which I'm sure it does, and this pandemic has taught us that, and it's a win-win situation.
Has there been any comprehensive study as to the economic benefits of some of the conservation projects in India till now?
There's hardly any available data.
Sir, Vikas sir, would you be aware of somebody, some group, somebody is doing that?
Nobody is doing that, because all people who are involved in development are oriented towards generation of money and not concern. So even Art Deco Society is trying to hold up things as far as possible. But I am quite sure sooner or later the whole Marine Drive will go. There is enough of pressure for development of Art Deco buildings. And what happened to the 4 buildings that are being demolished in Delhi for the main Central Vista project? When the
Right.
Hall of Nation was to be demolished,
Destroyed.
in 5 minutes time when the order came, it got demolished. So understand one thing, unless there is political will, nothing can happen.
That's a very important point. Aanchal, when you study, like I'm not saying this to discourage you, but when you study, everybody looks for employment and, immediate, sometimes a glamorous project, you would like to be a part of it. But like UNESCO also gives these heritage tags to cities, but they also take away the tag if you don't follow or conform to their, whatever their guidelines or requirements are. But we don't always think of these kind of real situations. Like I know there was a very big discussion after Ahmedabad got the heritage city tag from UNESCO, that they needed to restore some buildings in the old city. Vikas might be aware of this, and the local people refused. They said, we don't care, let this building go, it's just derelict, we need modern housing, we need modern kitchens and modern toilets and all that. We don't want to keep these drainage systems and all. So, and that's where the local, like, Pitker sir is saying, that's where the local corporators and everybody come from. So,
Right.
This is where an interesting point which Pitker made. In this last 75 years, we don't really have a ministry of conservation or lived in heritage or built heritage. You have ASIs and things like that. You have other this thing. So one is this. Second is we should experiment and engage. And if it works, then there is a point. There have been success examples, like Humayun's tomb is a great success example.
right.
Sundar Nursery, and everyone sees the benefit of it, and it certainly can convince. It needs to, you need to have some starting pilot projects which helps in demonstrating.
We don't have a representation in government.
Yes.
And if it were not for Pilu Modi, that the Architects Act would not have come. And once it came, do you know that from 72 to 2020, there was no Gazette notification of change. It happened in 2020 because some of the people in council thought that they can make a change. We don't have political representation at all. And bodies and NGOs and all that, it's okay. I mean, better, less said the better.
Yeah. So about council.
Aanchal, why don't you ask Vikas? You wanted to know if he has any tips, if he has something.
Yes. So would you like to share, 5 tips at least for our general audience, or maybe even people who are not from the conservation or heritage field, who are interested in conserving maybe any part of their house or their built structure? Any general tips that you could suggest for just conserving items that you have?
Well, as I said to you, you have to strongly believe in conservation, and it's very tempting to when people ask you to do wrong things. Like I've many times got an approach, will you demolish this building and help me in designing a heritage building in its place? You learn to turn it down straight. You have to have a passion for conservation. It works only with passion. You have to do, as you know, it also says, do work sincerely, honestly, and with dedication and determination. But what is important is to get the first few breaks. So just try to get that first some early breaks where you get a good contractor to execute, a good team of engineer or whatever consultant is required, and a good client. If you get that, even if it's a small, it's a small project, but that will help you in taking, and that small sapling will become a victory.
Right. And also, I, as a young professional, I generally feel that there is a need for knowledge sharing. Like a lot of times, we kind of feel that different projects that are being executed in different parts of the country, we don't get to learn a lot from them. Like the main problem that we have right now, the issues that we're facing is that probably, some sort of a database or some sort of a knowledge sharing system where we are able to share our notes with our other emerging professionals, or even learn from professionals like you. So something that Polami ma'am has started is very, very important right now. This is a gap that we feel very regularly now, very frequently nowadays. So we're always looking towards each other and not able to move from there. So I think this session was very, very helpful in that sense.
But there should be a dedicated seminar to on the challenges and the failures in conservation and how to learn from it. So you have an open seminar where you can share an experience, because I did have a problem. I was experimenting with some line work, and the thickness of that increased and it started crumbling, and I had to redo it. So as I said to you, we all can share experiences and can talk about it, but there should be a forum. There should be a forum.
Sometimes there are seminars, but they sometimes get restricted.
They're not on
to
the
one
failures.
They're not on the failures.
They're not on failures. Everyone wants to,
It's like a success story kind of a thing. Yeah, that's true. Then also they get restricted to one architecture college or something like that. It's not always that's open. Now probably it's easier with an online session that goes on. Now if possible, we can, as the Museum Memories project can provide a platform for such a seminar. If you can put us in touch, we would be very happy to host such a seminar. And then because we record the session, so it can be recorded so that people can refer to it for in the later future. Sometimes you might have come across something which Aanchal was telling. You might not know what to do now. What do you tell the craftsman? He's waiting to hear from you, and you don't know. It's like you said, na, there's a chuna ka kaam gadbad ho gaya. Then what do you do? Do you panic? And there are deadlines, right? Your money you'll get paid against the work you have completed by this deadline. So yeah, that's true. We need to understand.
What is becoming more concern from this younger generation is that now the contracting firms are hiring conservation architects. That's the sad part of it. That's not a very encouraging sign. Ideally, the clients and that should be the right system.
So you're saying that it's not an architectural firm which is bidding and getting the project, but like a fabricator contractor who might want a conservation architect who will do what they would like to do. Okay, that's a very
it's like what happened to the interior. What happened to the interior designing industry? They become turnkey contractors. That's what is happening.
And interior designers are mostly shown a Pinterest board. That's a very big complaint. A lot of them have that. clients, big clients also. Show them a Pinterest board, say that, we want to do these 10 things. That's it. So that creativity goes for a toss. But what Chirodeep also said is interesting, because we tend to focus on this important heritage building, the iconic ones, and we tend to overlook sometimes the entire, the microcosm, the entire system,
The
ecosystem.
joy which you get of restoring the unloved building is far much more than the so-called celebrated ones. I can assure you on that.
You did mention in the interview that when people say that, this is our building and all that, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Is there one project of yours which you feel that you're disappointed that you couldn't do what you wanted to do? Or let's hear your something.
Well, there are projects, as I said to you, like I was given Elphinstone College, I was given Institute of Science. But it was so difficult working on it. Normally colleges are on, suddenly you have a visit, suddenly the election centers, it turns out to be election center, then you can't do noisy work because it's besides the High Court. Then some works will happen in the evening and in the night. Who supervise it? And so, yeah, I wish I could have done more, but I could have contributed more, but I tried my best and you could do it. And again, coordinating it is difficult because the user department is someone else and the client is someone else. The client is PWD, the user is someone else. They don't meet. No one writes down minutes. So it's not a very comfortable world in which we operate sometimes.
Is there any project that you would like to redo because you enjoyed it? So I'm not saying that the building is redo in the sense, I'm not saying it should be in a bad condition. I'm not saying that way, but
doctor
you would do it
wishes that a
differently.
patient never visit. A doctor really requests that a patient should never visit him again.
No, I mean that you would do it differently this time.
As I said to you, you enjoyed doing some things 10 or 20 years ago with all that freedom, which now, after 30 years of experience, I feel suffocated and restricted, that you don't get that flexibility to do what you did. I think that's a very sad part of it.
Something we should remember. Does anyone else have any questions? Any of the other participants? Feel free to ask, please. Is Malvika, Vedehi? No, Aanchal?
Hi, so no questions.
Yes, Vedehi.
From me, but it was really interesting. So I'm new to this. I am not like a conservation person, but just starting to I've been thinking about this. So for me, it was like, this was like a start. So just listening in.
Thank you. So where are you from? What do you do, Vedehi?
Hi, so I'm from NID, Andhra Pradesh, and I'm a design student. I live in Ghaziabad.
Good. Nice to have you join us. Aanchal, hope you found some answers, some guidelines, some way forward.
Yeah, definitely, ma'am. I think so. This session basically, opens up a lot of different avenues where we can pitch in. We are just now, young professionals are just, trying to understand what our future is in the conservation field and what we can do to help. So, and also one of the major things that we always come across is the perception of heritage that people have. So, like Sir said, sometimes it's really positive, like luxury, it's related with luxury and monuments and everything. And on the other hand, it's completely negative, just structures that have been totally put into disuse. But that zone in between where it is also being used, it is, people are living in it, it's a living heritage, and you also need to restore it with the coming times, and also be able to satisfy the users living there. That is something where we want to really bridge the gap and understand how to work with that. So that is something that sir really explained in detail. So that was very, very informative. Also, some sessions like these could have maybe more series, more parts to it. I feel that if you could arrange that, that would be really great. And we have a younger professionals pitching in, asking, and just generally interacting with experienced professionals becomes very, very helpful, especially post pandemic.
I think, Pauline,
Because,
what you should, sorry to interrupt, what you should do is ask some other few conservation architects also. And if you take one project in detail and someone can explain that, and that will help in explaining all the technical problems, the technical problems, and what are the other hitches and things like that.
Yes, and we could do it
As I said,
different city-wise also.
yeah, and different people also. So that's
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's a very good idea. That's a very good idea. That would matter.
I think it
a
would
lot.
help students like Vedehi also to understand.
Yes,
heritage
because
better.
designers come in a lot, because in terms of a communication design strategy, wayfinding, they are very useful and important to such projects. And another thing, Aanchal, you should remember what Vikas has said. Political lobbying and activism, that's very important. It's not a very nice word in today's world anywhere. It's sometimes
that is not to be done by us. That has to be done by the profession.
Exactly.
What do you say?
No, that's, I don't know if Vikas sir is there. But also, what is important is
no comment on that. Because it will be so negative that six people are hearing, it's all right. But I can speak some truth which you will not like.
No, please do.
No, don't worry. I know his truth. That's what has made me so powerful to at least stick to the right path, thanks to him, talking in the most blunt manner. I understand what he's saying.
Yeah, actually, even I do, because we're used to, as Vikas is saying, the success stories and people giving us sugar-coated stories, when actually the real world is very different, very, very challenging. And the realization should be that, you don't give in and get depressed and think that this profession is not worth it. It's to keep fighting. As our sir has messaged, is be sincere in your work. That's what's most important. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. We'll be putting up this video. And thank you, Vikas. Many, many thanks to you for taking out time for the interview and for this session. Thank you, all the participants, especially Vikas sir. Thank you, Chiradeep, Marvika, Vede. And many thanks, Aanchal. We will try to contact more, not just conservation architects, but even others, so that we can have a series discussion in continuity, because there's never an end to such discussions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.